In a world where magic and monsters were the norm, a lone adventurer dared to break a taboo. A diary of a certain nobleman once said, "Devouring monsters is taboo in this world. For a human, eating a monster means taking in their evil essence. The first symptom of absorbing this essence is an indescribable elation, accompanied by a strengthening of the body. The second symptom brings severe headaches, nausea, and intoxication. The third symptom is sudden death, or possibly, the consumer could turn into a monster themselves." A couple of days ago, in the vast world where magic and monsters were common, there lay the frontier city, a territory home to multiple labyrinths. Among these labyrinths was one called the Miasma Labyrinth. The air inside this labyrinth continually chipped away at the status of visiting adventurers. Most adventurers hated it, but one person was different from the others. Instead of avoiding the labyrinth, he visited it frequently. Soon, he was known as the Miasma Scavenger. But he didn't go to the labyrinth just to get high on miasma. No. He ventured there to harvest herbs that could only be acquired under these specific conditions. Most adventurers couldn't even last on the early floors of the dungeon, which allowed him to monopolize these herbs easily. The miasma grass he harvested had the effect of purifying miasma, making it an irreplaceable source of income for him. However, he knew the rules of supply and demand too well, so he didn't take too much. He only took what he needed, an amount that would last him around 3 days. With this, he made his way out of the labyrinth with a satisfied expression, as he knew he would be eating well tonight. But this was still a labyrinth after all. And since Rudy was on the 6th floor, he easily encountered monsters along the way. They weren't just any overgrown rats. They were miasma rats, creatures notorious for their toxic miasma and poison. This didn't surprise Rude, as many of the monsters that lived here thrived on these noxious elements, which contributed to why most adventurers avoided this place like the plague. Against him, however, that wouldn't work. He easily ignored their attacks, phasing through the fog, and swiftly killed the rat closest to him with a precise strike. But the rats were relentless. Even after seeing their comrade taken down, they didn't hesitate, launching themselves at Ruade with reckless abandon. He managed to take care of the first one, but missed the second, giving it the opportunity to lunge at him, aiming to bite his entire hand off. As the rat's teeth got perilously close to penetrating his skin, a sudden shout of fireball echoed through the labyrinth, diverting his attention. The next thing Rude saw was the rat engulfed in scorching flames. The force of the fireball was so intense that it knocked the rat to the other side of the wall, where it exploded upon impact, sending bits of smoldering fur and flesh flying. Rude was stunned, never having seen such a powerful spell before. His train of thought was interrupted, as he overheard the spellcaster sighing in frustration, lamenting that they had missed their intended target. They spoke unapologetically, as if Rude wasn't even there. From what he understood, it seemed these adventurers had been aiming for him instead of the rat, but since they had inadvertently saved his life, they just rolled with it, continuing their conversation as if nothing had happened. And Rude had seen these faces plenty of times at the Adventurers Guild, which made him even more pissed. It looked like they knew him, but didn't regard him as anything significant. Even when they extended a hand to help him up, he knew it was all an act. So he ignored their gesture and expressed his appreciation for the sentiment, but firmly stated he would appreciate a heads up before they did anything. But this didn't sit well with them, especially the guy who had cast the fireball. He had saved Rude already, so he was not having it that Rude was being ungrateful and still complaining. But before things could get out of hand, their attention was then diverted by a member of their group who had discovered the miasma grass colony they had been searching for. And this delighted his comrades while this surprised Rude, as he realized that these adventurers were actually following him because they wanted his harvesting spot. But the mage couldn't let Rude accuse them of such underhanded tactics. He sneered at Rude and made it clear that they weren't what he assumed they were. They were just adventurers earning a living through the labyrinth, and had just so happened to meet him there and save him while they were at it. But it seemed like that was a mistake because a miasma scavenger like Rude couldn't even say a proper word of gratitude. The last part of his sentence hung in the air like a veiled threat, and Rude knew they were lying, but he also understood the situation. These adventurers were stronger than him, and he was outnumbered. He didn't stand a chance of surviving if he fought them. Swallowing his pride, he bowed his head, apologized for accusing them, and thanked them for saving him. The words tasted bitter, but there was nothing else he could do. Suppressing the rage boiling inside him, he kept his composure, knowing that survival was more important than his wounded pride at this moment. A few moments later, Rude returned to his base, eating at the Full Belly restaurant. But even here, he just couldn't catch a break. He was unceremoniously thrown out because, whenever he was at the restaurant, the smell made the food taste horrible, and they were blunt about it, as he just couldn't seem to get it through his head. They insisted he should abandon his daydream of being an adventurer, as he clearly wasn't one. An adventurer needed the ability to defeat monsters, and someone like him with a trash skill like abnormal status nullification, wasn't cut out for the role. As Rude lay on the floor, helpless, their mocking words rang in his ears. He couldn't even disagree with them. It was true that his unique ability, abnormal status nullification, was useful for exploring the Miasma Labyrinth, but it didn't give him the necessary skills to defeat monsters, something vital for adventurers, and as someone who didn't have any combat skills, he wasn't welcome in any party. And he was even named the Miasma Scavenger because he always scavenged for items in the lower levels of the Miasma Labyrinth. In other words, his so-called skill made him an outcast as an adventurer. As a grown man, he was still fighting life-or-death battles against mere rats. This realization plunged him into hopelessness. He began questioning if he was really going to continue living his life as the Miasma Scavenger, a job that had sustained him for quite a while but offered no real future. But with no other skills, it seems like he was destined to remain a scavenger in the Miasma Labyrinth, with no friends, no hobbies, no bitches, and his life is forever empty, devoid of purpose. Still, he pressed on. When the next day arrived, Rude went straight to the Adventurers Guild. He was early, needing to find another colony while he still had some money left from yesterday. As he walked through the halls, he noticed it was unusually noisy today, leading him to wonder what was going on. But this wasn't his concern though, so he went straight to the receptionist and asked if any good requests had come in. She reported that a new labyrinth had been discovered. The news shocked him. A labyrinth was a place filled with treasures and magic items, a golden opportunity for any adventurer. It was no wonder the guild was so noisy today. But then, the receptionist relayed another piece of news that shocked him even more, and this time it was bad. The price of the miasma herb he usually brought in had dropped starting today. He immediately asked why, and she explained that the miasma labyrinth was never popular to begin with. Now, with everyone focused on the new labyrinth, there would be no demand for the miasma herb at all. This put him in a state of disbelief. The livelihood he had relied on had become obsolete overnight. It seemed he had no choice but to venture into the new labyrinth in the Avalo Mountains. However, the receptionist informed him that he couldn't do that. The new labyrinth's exploration requirement was to be D rank or higher, and as an E-ranked adventurer, he wasn't qualified. He gritted his teeth in frustration. Desperate, he tried to convince the receptionist, but to no avail. She was just following the rules and believed that even if he did go, he would only end up dying in vain. She couldn't allow that. Her conscience wouldn't let her. With this, dread set in. With no other source of income, he was on the verge of homelessness, doomed to drift away with time. Luckily for Rude, his struggles were overheard by another adventurer who happened to need a porter. The adventurer asked Rude if he was willing to join their party. With no other options and the man seeming trustworthy, Rude accepted the offer. Thus, they immediately rode a carriage towards the new labyrinth. The party consisted of 4 members, including Rude, but the atmosphere was palpably awkward, so the blonde adventurer who had recruited him broke the tension with small talk. Expressing his relief at having found Rude, he mentioned that he had wanted someone to carry materials from the new labyrinth, but couldn't find anyone available. It was probably because all the adventurers in the guild were gathered at the new labyrinth, making it difficult to secure a porter. However, the other party members began questioning the blonde adventurer, asking why out of everyone he chose to dive with a miasma scavenger. Couldn't he find someone better? Clearly displaying their disdain for Rude. But the blonde adventurer couldn't afford infighting within his team, especially before they even arrived at their destination. So he tried his best to defuse the situation, explaining that since Rude had been an adventurer for a long time, he believed it was better to have him along instead of a complete newbie. After calming the initial discord, Bayer redirected the conversation by reintroducing himself. He announced that he was the leader of the Scarlet Sword. He then pointed out his companions, Sasha and Rick, both D-rank adventurers like himself. And as a courtesy, Rude also introduced himself. With introductions out of the way, Bayer mentioned that before they ventured into the labyrinth, he'd like to know more about Rude's capabilities. Rude showed him his guild card, and to Bayer's surprise, he noticed that Rude could use fire magic. Rude quickly clarified that although his power was too low for combat, it proved useful in dark places and for cooking. But before he could elaborate further, Bayer simply smiled and reassured him that his skills were indeed helpful and that he would be counting on him. A few moments later, they arrived at the newly discovered Avalio Labyrinth. The excitement was palpable as it seemed they were the first to arrive. With hope and dreams fueling their steps, they sprinted towards the entrance, eager to start exploring the labyrinth's unknown depths. But as they opened the main door of the labyrinth, loud noises greeted them. Adventurers had already filled the place, so they ventured further inside, only to find the labyrinth occupied at every turn. From gathering herbs to fighting monsters and even finding treasures, every spot had already been taken. Adventurers were everywhere they went. This immediately pissed off Sasha, who threw a tantrum. kicking rocks in frustration. And so Bayer concluded that most of the first layer had already been explored, leading Rick to suggest that they dive deeper, believing there would be fewer people further down. Sasha quickly supported this idea. But as a veteran, Rude disagreed. He believed it would be better to start by mapping the first layer of this newly discovered labyrinth. But his suggestion was abruptly cut off by Sasha and Rick, who criticized him for voicing his opinion. They reminded him that as their porter, he shouldn't be giving out his thoughts, and that this was why he was stuck in E rank, accusing him of having a weak will. Thankfully, Bayer immediately stepped in, diffusing the quarrel once more by scolding his team. However, he acknowledged both perspectives, and agreed that if things continued this way, they wouldn't get any good results. Therefore, they would need to aim even deeper into the labyrinth, hoping to find less competition and greater rewards. With that decision made, they entered the fourth layer of the labyrinth. Upon arriving, they encountered ferocious beasts that attacked on sight. Rude quickly became the target, as the beast could sense his weakness. Luckily for him, Rick was there to save him, but not without teasing him for being scared and calling him old man. And Sasha and Bayer didn't lag behind either, displaying their honed skills and efficiently dealing with any monsters that came near. Witnessing such prowess for the first time changed Rude's perspective. They were strong, far stronger than he would ever become, while he found himself paralyzed with fear, unable to move. In that moment, he realized that perhaps he wasn't cut out to be an adventurer after all. A few moments passed, and they successfully killed the pack of wolves that had charged at them. This victory reinforced their belief that diving deeper was the right call. It was refreshing not having other parties around. The monsters weren't too strong, and they even found some treasure, making this a successful raid overall. Just when Rude thought things would go smoothly and uneventfully, Rick commanded him to collect materials from the monsters he had defeated. Rude responded kindly, explaining that he couldn't collect the materials as the monsters were too damaged, and the magic stones were probably shattered. But this didn't sit well with Rick, and with anger in his eyes, he insisted that Rudy hadn't even looked yet, and couldn't be sure if the stones were shattered. So he commanded Rude to do as he was told and not slack off. And given that they had hired him as the porter, and Rick had saved him numerous times, Rude complied. But as he suspected, the monsters were all mangled, their guts and blood creating an awful smell that made it difficult to collect the stones. He considered using his fire skill to burn the corpses, slightly cover the stench. However, this led to more teasing from Rick, who laughed and suggested it looked like Rude was about to eat the monster corpses. But he won't lie. They have been exploring for a while, and he is starting to feel hungry. So even monster meat's starting to look delicious. And Sasha just looked at Rick with disgust for even thinking that. Not only because it was gross, but also because eating monsters was taboo among adventurers. The mana absorbed into their bodies could have unpredictable effects. And Rick smirked at how serious she was being and clarified that he was just joking. He assured them that once they got back, he would use the money they earned to eat as much delicious food as he wanted. But their conversation was abruptly cut short by a loud roar echoing through the floor. Looking towards the source, they realized they were in trouble. A B-rank minotaur was staring at them like a snack. Encountering such a high-ranked monster in a lair this shallow was unexpected, indicating that this labyrinth was far more dangerous than they initially thought. But knowing this wouldn't save them, so panic set in. There was no way they could beat something like that. But as the leader, Bayer sprang into action and asked Rudy to give him his backpack, stating he needed the items inside to save them. And without question, Rude handed over his bag. Bayer then instructed Rude to keep an eye on the Minotaur's movements, which he obliged. But as the monster closed in, Rude asked Bayer about his plan, or even if he had one, to which Bayer smiled, claiming he had a great plan, as it involved Rude's back to be cut open, leaving him reeling in pain. And this action prompted the others to cast their skills as well. Rick cast Warrior's Encouragement, which made Rude the focus of the monster's attacks, while Sasha cast Haste, doubling their own speed. And their coordination was impeccable, and it dawned on Rude that these guys had planned to abandon him from the start. And Bayer confirmed Rude's suspicions with a nasty smile. Why else would they bring the miasma scavenger with them, if not to be their target for their wicked and sadistic game? And Rude's eyes widened in disbelief as he realized that those he thought to be allies had left him for dead. The Minotaur was just an added threat. Even without it, they would have betrayed him. In the face of such a cruel fate, the only thing Rude could do was scream. But even that was abruptly cut off as he noticed the Minotaur about to swing its axe. Thankfully, adrenaline kicked in, and in a last-ditch effort, he managed to dodge the attack just in time. This unexpected feat made him smirk a little. He hadn't realized he was capable of such agility. However, he had exhausted every bit of energy left within him, and the monster was ever so close, and so he accepted his fate, as it was better than dying homeless without money anyway. But pain had snapped him back to reality. He hadn't expected it to hurt this much. He didn't get the instant death he was hoping for, leaving him to experience the pain much longer. And just when he thought things couldn't get worse, the wall they had just broken through revealed a deep, dark hole beyond it, and the sight of the abyss made his stomach churn. Even the Minotaur seemed to realize it had messed up. A few moments later, Rude opened his eyes to a dim green light, barely enough to see his surroundings. Confused as to why he was still alive, he noticed the Minotaur had been caught under him, breaking his fall, but it was only a matter of time. With half of his body broken, and the excruciating pain made every breath a struggle, he knew that even if no other monsters found him, he would likely die from blood loss or starvation long before his body had a chance to heal. And so he drifted back to sleep, but hunger gnawed at him, waking him again. He hadn't eaten since yesterday after being thrown out of the restaurant. His body screamed for food, and the thought of eating the Minotaur crossed his mind, making him laugh bitterly. Everyone knew that eating a monster would only lead to disaster. Closing his eyes once more, he reflected on the miserable life he had lived. As he teetered on the edge of consciousness, a memory surfaced. A voice from long ago, belonging to someone whose face he could no longer remember, echoed in his mind. This person had always told him that no matter how hard or painful it got, he must never give up, and the next thing he knew, he was already eating the Minotaur, munching its raw meat despite knowing the risks. When a human with depleted magic consumes mana-rich monster meat, the monster's mana particles invade their body, leading to a monsterized state. This fate is more terrifying than dying from poison, making it a taboo. But in order to regain the blood he had lost and sate his hunger, Rude took a gamble, bringing about an unexpected transformation. Thanks to his unique ability, he avoided turning into a monster entirely. As he absorbed enough mana from the high-ranked beast, his body began to heal at an accelerated rate. The once broken arm and the sliced open back were now healed as if they had never been damaged. Suddenly, an outburst of mana filled his body, empowering him like never before. Skills started to manifest. He had acquired the Minotaur's abilities, including Roar, Battle Axe Mastery, and Physical Boost. Rude's body began to move automatically, guided by instinct through the dimly lit hallways. He walked aimlessly, driven by a newfound hunger for more monsters to devour. But he didn't have to search for long, as a swarm of monster bats took notice of his presence and bolted towards him without hesitation. Despite their numbers, they were no match for his newly acquired skills. With a powerful roar, he killed many of the bats instantly. Those that survived were debilitated by a debuff, leaving them unable to flee and taunted into attacking him. As soon as the bats got close, Rude activated his physical boost, temporarily enhancing his strength to swing his massive axe, killing the bats in a single, powerful sweep. Without hesitation, he began eating once more, gaining their skill echolocation. This ability allowed him to detect surrounding creatures even in darkness, making the once dimly lit labyrinth as clear as day. He could now see the structure of the labyrinth and the location of approaching monsters. Drawn by the sounds of battle, despite the overwhelming odds, Rude laughed maniacally. He wondered which of the monsters would be the next to be devoured. As predicted by his new skill, a mass of monsters emerged from the dark, attacking him together. But with his enhanced abilities, he dispatched them as soon as they were in range. The thrill of his newfound power surged through him. Just days ago, he had struggled with mere rats. But now, even monsters far above his rank fell like butter before his axe. The mix of ecstasy and rage fueled him. He hadn't forgotten the sadistic humans who wronged him, and these monsters were mere obstacles to his revenge. Outnumbered and exhausted, he continued to swing his axe relentlessly, turning monsters into corpses, and then consuming them. Despite the foul taste and smell, he munched on them to heal and regain energy, all the while gaining their skills. He acquired an array of abilities: the appraisal skill from an eye monster, absorb skill from another, agility boost, and lightning cloak from the Thunderwolf. His body thrummed with power as he reveled in the multitude of skills he had collected. But the fight was far from over. A much larger monster appeared, dwarfing the Minotaur he had previously defeated. Still, Rude lunged at it, stopping its gaping maw with his axe, and using his lightning cloak to electrocute it from the inside. The tactic proved effective, and after defeating the beast, he gained the poison mist ability, making it easier to kill smaller mobs. Even the spiders that attacked from the shadows were swiftly dispatched, earning him the thread manipulation skill, which allowed him to string up monsters and make hunting them even easier. Hours passed, and he had killed hundreds of monsters. Yet, the struggle only intensified. More powerful creatures decided to challenge him, but his rage and determination knew no bounds. He wouldn't let anything stop him from escaping this hellhole and exacting his revenge. Swinging his axe left and right, he noticed his mastery improving. The battle axe now felt like an extension of his arm, and he could sense the monster's magic without even looking at them. It was as if his entire being had adjusted to the labyrinth, as if he had been there for years. His eyes lit up with a feral gleam, knowing that these monsters were nothing but dead meat. A few moments later, Rude emerged from the labyrinth's entrance, finally seeing the light of day once more. He had never expected to make it back, but he had survived. Ecstatic, he couldn't help but shout with joy. Meanwhile, inside the Adventurers Guild, everyone was discussing the recent events with worried expressions. A tragedy had taken place in the labyrinth, and at the center of it was Bayer's group, who had reported the incident to Lankars, Bologna's branch guildmaster. After listening to their report, Lankars had rounded up all the adventurers who were in the labyrinth, except for Rude, who was still missing. Bayer confirmed this with a grief-stricken expression, explaining that when they encountered the Minotaur on the 4th floor, Rude was killed before they even had a chance to protect him. Even Sasha and Rick had put on their Oscar-worthy acting skills to use, crying as if they were genuinely grieving. Lankars believed their story for now, understanding the gravity of the situation. For the time being, he prohibited entry into the labyrinth. Even the receptionist was distraught, believing that the adventurer she saw regularly would never return. To her surprise, that same adventurer suddenly appeared right at the door. His arrival shocked everyone, especially the trio. They began sweating bullets, but Bayer quickly composed himself and acted accordingly. He rushed towards Rude, pretending to be relieved to see him alive and well. In reality, he got close to threaten Rude, warning him that if he said anything unnecessary, he would kill him on the spot. And, just like before, Bayer's cronies followed suit, acting all buddy-buddy, as if they hadn't just tried to kill him. Even Sasha, the audacious bitch, claimed they had tried to go back to look for him but couldn't, because the labyrinth was closed. Despite the absurdity, Rude appeared stunned and compliant, prompting Bayer to happily proclaim a celebration of his survival, suggesting they relocate to a more secluded place. However, something was off. An intense pressure emanated from Rudy, rendering them unable to move. This was impossible for them to comprehend. But before they could react, Rude told everyone the truth, declaring that these guys had used him as a pawn. Judging by everyone's reaction, Bayer knew they were screwed if he didn't clear things up, so he shakily asked Rude what he was talking about, but Rude ignored him, indifferent to his panic. This prompted Lankars to step in and ask Rude what he meant by being used as a pawn. Rude recounted what had happened. Bayer had stolen his supplies and attacked him from behind. Rick had used a skill to lure the Minotaur towards him, and then Sasha had cast haste on the trio so they could run away. Immediately, Bayer approached Lankars, trying to convince him that they didn't do any of that. But Lankars knew better. He had been in the business for quite a while and could spot a two-faced liar when he saw one. To clarify the truth of the matter, Lankars mentioned that he had a guest who could help them. And from the shadows emerged a girl draped in a violet robe. Her presence alone made it clear she was a truth officer. This revelation completely shocked the trio. Truth officers rarely left the royal capital, so they demanded to know why she was there at such a convenient time. Lankars confirmed it wasn't a coincidence. He had already suspected them, as there had been an unusually high number of deaths among the porters temporarily joining their party. So he had called in an old favor to bring the truth officer here, and without further delay, the truth officer did her job. With just a glimpse at the group, she revealed to everyone that the members of Scarlet Sword were lying, and that Rude's claims were the truth. Bayer was in a state of shock, his world tearing apart so fast that he couldn't comprehend it. The reputation he had meticulously built crumbled, as everyone immediately turned against him and his group. Desperate, he panicked and questioned the truth officer, demanding to know what someone like her could possibly know. And Lankars was just baffled by Bayer's audacity. Still, he answered for the benefit of those who didn't know, explaining that truth officers possessed a skill impossible to acquire later in life, a skill whose effectiveness rivaled that of a unique skill. It was the truth skill, and no lie could pass before it. And what could be more trustworthy than the words of someone who has pledged to the country, and for Bayer to question that power is heresy, and abandoning his comrades is an adventurer's taboo. Not only that, he intentionally injured his comrades and used them as disposable pawns. So he concluded that even if they continued to investigate, it was certain that the adventurer qualifications of the Scarlet Sword members would be revoked, and they would all be reduced to slavery. This decree shattered the trio's world. They had never expected things to go south so quickly. But unlike the two who collapsed on the floor in despair, Bayer was consumed with rage. Unwilling to become a slave, he started blaming others for his shortcomings, accusing the truth officer of ruining everything. If only she weren't there, they would have gotten away with it. In a blind fury, Bayer lunged towards the truth officer, intent on killing her. Lankars knew better than to intervene. He understood she could handle herself and could easily kill Bayer if she wanted to. Even the truth officer was shocked to see someone so foolish. But Rude, on the other hand, doesn't know this, so he decided to intervene. He blocked Bayer's advance and warned him never to dare touch the truth officer. Bayer couldn't believe what he saw. The weakling he once knew had appeared in front of him so quickly and casually blocked his attack without breaking a sweat. But before Bayer could launch another attack, Rude cast Fist, launching Bayer's ugly face across the room. The impact was so powerful that it left Sasha and Ricky frozen in place. It was evident that Rude had truly changed. Something definitely happened to him inside the labyrinth. In the previous chapter, Rude was betrayed by his team, left for dead to serve as a distraction so his teammates could escape the Minotaur. Unexpectedly, the Minotaur made a huge mistake and fell into an abyss with him. Fortunately, Rude survived, though injured and without food. Time was limited, but he wasn't willing to give up without a fight. In a last-ditch effort, he consumed monster meat, knowing it was a taboo. But thanks to Rudy's unique ability, abnormal status nullification, he underwent an unexpected transformation. He could now steal the skills from the monsters he ate. Thus, he survived, made his way out of the labyrinth, and sought revenge on those who betrayed him by exposing their deeds to everyone. Fortunately, the guildmaster Lankars had also suspected them, and called in an old favor to bring a truth officer to their guild. The trio was easily convicted of their crimes. But since Bayer was a prideful son of a gun, he blamed it all on the truth officer and attacked her. But Rude had had enough of his audacity, so he intervened, stopping Bayer's advance and punching his face, sending him flying across the room. Now on to the next part. Rude sat across from Lankars in the Adventurers Guild's reception room, the atmosphere tense yet formal. Lankars apologized for bothering him so soon after returning from such a grueling ordeal, acknowledging that Rude must be exhausted. However, this meeting was a necessary formality after the scandal that had transpired. Rude, although weary, assured Lankars that he didn't mind. He was more concerned about the fate of the three who had wronged him. With this on his mind, he asked Lankars about their punishment. Lankars explained that the 3 members of the Scarlet Sword would be taken in by the staff and undergo interrogation. If it was confirmed that they were repeat offenders who used their porters as bait, they would lose all their possessions and adventurer qualifications, ultimately being reduced to slaves. And Bayer went as far as to cross the truth officers, so he probably won't appear before him again, which was a relief to Rude. This news was comforting, and he felt content, ready to leave. But before he could go, Lankars's assistant handed him a bag of coins, explaining that it contained the profits gained in the new labyrinth. Since his teammates had lost the rights to it, it was only fair that he should receive it. Inside the bag were 200,000 Regan, which surprised him, but he knew this wasn't the time to be modest. He had earned it through his ordeal, so he gratefully accepted the reward. After leaving the room with the bag of coins in his hand, Rude couldn't help but hug it affectionately. This was the first time he had ever held such an amount, and the relief and excitement were palpable. Finally, he could cover his living expenses for a long time. For the first time, he felt like a true adventurer. It would have taken ages to accumulate such an amount by diligently gathering miasma grass. Adventurers really could make good money. But he snapped out of his daydreaming as he noticed the unusual silence in the air. Normally, the guild members would mock him upon his arrival, but today was different. Maybe no one was insulting him because they saw what happened earlier, but that didn't mean they would suddenly be kind either. And if he stood out anymore, there might be those who found his sudden rise in status suspicious, and he didn't want that. So he decided it was best to continue earning in the miasma labyrinth as before. With this in mind, he stopped feeling gloomy and focused on the task ahead. He finally had some money, so he needed to get his gear ready and eat whatever he wanted. First, he felt the need to head to the tool shop. Upon arriving, an item immediately caught his attention. It was a magic bag, and with that, the day ended on a high note, with Rude feeling more hopeful and prepared for the future. When the next day arrived, Rude ventured into the miasma labyrinth as he used to, slaying the monstrous rats with ease. And the fact that these creatures, which once posed a significant threat, were now defeated so effortlessly left him feeling bored. Just 2 days ago, he would have had to avoid a group of 5 of them. Things had certainly changed. To better understand his current situation, he used his appraisal skill on the rats. Surprisingly, the skill he had obtained by consuming the evil eye monster could even be used on corpses, and the rats were shown to be level 9. And considering he had no trouble dealing with them, he estimated his own level to be around 20, and since he is curious about his exact status, he took out his badge and checked his stats. To his astonishment, his level was now 42, with attributes averaging at 150, a significant leap from his previous stats, which were only around 15. And just yesterday, he had been at level 7. This rapid progression was unheard of, which made him excited, prompting him to check the skills he had acquired. As he expected, the number of skills had increased dramatically, not just by 5s but by 10s. The variety of skills added in one day was unprecedented. No one had ever experienced such a phenomenon. This made Rude more excited than ever, and the skills, both active and passive, significantly boosted his overall combat abilities. With this, he considered returning to the same labyrinth to continue increasing his power. But he remembered that when he passed by the place where he had fallen, he noticed the wall that had been broken was now sealed. Moreover, the new labyrinth was going to remain closed for a while, so going back wasn't an option. Still, he was eager to test his new powers. He wanted to see how effective they were on the deeper floors of the miasma labyrinth. Although he had initially planned to explore lightly, he now felt compelled to dive deeper, and beggars couldn't be choosers after all, so he steeled himself and ventured further into the depths of the labyrinth. From the 6th floor to the 9th floor and then to the 13th floor, things remained the same. There was no challenge at all. He didn't even have the chance to use his skills. It seemed these monsters wouldn't do. He needed to go even farther to find more suitable prey. Determined, he descended to the 24th floor, where he encountered a different kind of monster. This one belonged to a bipedal species he hadn't seen before. From the shadows, he immediately used his appraisal skill, revealing it was from a dragon race, a lizard warrior with a high amount of health and balanced stats. And according to the books, these creatures were supposed to fight in coordination with their companions. But this one was alone. He felt it might be worth a try. With this in mind, he launched an offensive. But unfortunately, the lizard's situational awareness was high, allowing it to sense and dodge his initial attack, escaping with only minimal injury. Still, Rude thought he had the upper hand, and believed this would be easy. But to his surprise, the lizard opted for a tactical retreat. Obviously, Rude couldn't let his prey get away, especially since he didn't know when he'd encounter a lone lizard again. So he zoomed in, and after a few more steps, he realized he wouldn't have to chase for long. The lizard had reached a dead end, and feeling more confident, he prepared to finish it off. But as he got close, he noticed the lizard's expression had changed from one of panic to a smirk. Instantly, Rude understood he was in deep trouble. He had stupidly walked into a trap and had been set up. The smirk on the lizard's face turned into a guttural laugh, echoing through the dimly lit cave. From the shadows, more lizard warriors emerged, their eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. Rude's heart pounded as he realized that even with the difference in level, this situation is bad. The odds had shifted dramatically. But Rude had killed monsters in groups before, and this was no different. He decided to take them down one by one. Lunging at the injured lizard with brute force, he knocked it down, making it defenseless. Just as he swung to kill it, another lizard blocked his attack. Before he knew it, another appeared behind him. Luckily, he managed to dodge, surprising the lizard with his quick reaction. Seeing its reaction made Rude smirk, but his confidence quickly faded as he realized their numbers had doubled. This was entirely different from the monsters he had killed in the previous labyrinth. Though they were few in numbers, these lizards were coordinated, making it difficult for him to reduce their numbers. But something felt off. Even if these monsters were good at working together, using such ambush tactics and coordinating their movements to this extent was unbelievable for lizards. He realized that just before they showed such coordination, there was a high-pitched sound, likely a command. With this in mind, he scanned his surroundings beyond the lizardmen in front of him, and saw a differently colored lizard standing at the back. Wait, is that... Oh no. Damn. He's cooked.
No, I'm just kidding.
He scanned his surroundings beyond the lizardmen in front of him, and saw a differently colored lizard standing at the back. Immediately, he used his appraisal skill. As expected, it was a lizard general with a much higher level and overall stats, but what caught his attention more was its ability called the command skill. This explained why the lizards were fighting so well and efficiently. This find made him smile, as he finally knew who to kill first. But the general noticed his gaze as well, and commanded everyone to kill him as fast as possible. They rushed in all together, but instead of fighting them head-on, Rude had another plan in mind. Using his physical boost, he swung his sword in fury, forcing the lizards away and opening a path. And when the lizards thought he was about to charge at them again, he used them as a platform to give himself a boost, avoiding the other lizards and heading straight for the lizard general. The sudden move caught the general off guard, its eyes widening in surprise, as it was unable to defend in time, and received Rude's attack head-on. But to Rude's surprise, the lizard he thought would be cut open was just standing there, alive and unscathed. And the general took advantage of Rude's momentary shock to counterattack. And being so close, it was impossible for Rude to dodge. But just like the general, the blade didn't pierce Rude's body, as he had activated the armor spider's steel body. With this, the general realized they weren't his match, so he stepped back, with uncertainty flickering in its eyes. But this just gave Rude the chance to analyze them more closely. Rude wondered what had happened to his attack. He definitely felt the impact, yet there wasn't a single scratch on the general. And he knew the general didn't possess a skill that enhanced its durability, so it had to be someone else's power. With this, he scanned the soldiers again. Initially, he couldn't see any particularly special skills among them, but his attention was diverted to an injured lizard with a particularly familiar wound. Checking its stats, he noticed its substitute skill. This was why the general had survived. The injured lizard was taking the damage instead. Immediately, Rude zoomed in on this particular lizard, plunging his sword to end its misery. While doing so, he felt a strange connection to this lizard, an underling reduced to a substitute and a sacrificial pawn. But now, it wouldn't have to suffer any longer. As he pulled his sword from its lifeless body, he promised that the others wouldn't have to worry either, as he would make sure to end them all. Meanwhile, the general's eyes widened in panic as it realized what Rude had done. With its backup dead, the next strike from Rude would surely cause real damage. With this, desperation fueled its orders as it commanded all its minions to attack together. It was now or never. If they couldn't kill this human, they were doomed. Unfortunately for them, this was exactly what Rude wanted. With the general joining the fray, the situation became much easier to handle. Utilizing his thread manipulation skill, Rude transformed into your friendly neighbor Spider-Man, slinging himself up and out of reach of their attacks, while also positioning himself perfectly, allowing him to ensnare the entire group in his sticky web. Caught in the sticky trap, the lizard struggled helplessly. Rude approached the general, a victorious grin spreading across his face, showing to it that he had won the battle, and with a quick and decisive strike, he separated the general's head from its body, and the remaining lizards, now leaderless and trapped, soon were swiftly dispatched. And with the immediate threat eliminated, it was time for Rude to eat. This time, he wouldn't have to resort to eating raw flesh. He had come prepared with his cooking items stored in his newly acquired magic bag. Like any magical world, magic bags had expanded space inside and significantly reduced the weight of the items within. Most adventurers couldn't afford such luxury, but Rude wasn't a normal adventurer anymore, allowing him to enjoy such item. From it, he took out his galvanized round skillet, an eco-friendly wood veneer cutting board, and seasonings borrowed from his aunt, and with everything ready, he began cooking with palpable excitement. On the hidden floor, he had been desperate to survive, but he had always wanted to try this, and the savory aroma of cooking meat soon filled the air. Rude expertly seared the monster flesh, adding a pinch of this and a dash of that. The meat sizzled and browned beautifully in the skillet. When the meal was finally ready, the meat looked so scrumptious. This was the first time he had ever seen such a juicy meat that made him drool like this. Without thinking twice, he gobbled it up, savoring the flavors that exploded on his tongue. Who would have thought monsters could taste like this? He even felt that he might get addicted to it. With this realization, he knew that if he cooked it just right, he might never go hungry again. Not only did the meal satisfy his hunger, but it also granted him new skills. Most notably, he acquired the command skill. Still, he wondered how the meat could be so good. The only possibility he could think of was that it was related to the magical powers that monsters possess. Speaking of magic power, the skills from the Minotaur, Armor Spider, and Evil Eye had been quite helpful, but there were skills he hadn't tried yet after leaving the Avalo Mountain Labyrinth, such as those from the Thunderwolf and the Black Serpent. With this in mind, he decided to try them out and might as well sample a variety of monsters on his way back. Speaking of skills, he remembered that lizard with the substitute ability. That skill had proven to be quite interesting and useful. If he could find and consume more monsters with unique skills, his strength and versatility would only grow. A few moments later, Rude arrived at the 21st floor of the labyrinth, where he encountered cat-sized moths and poisonous frogs. Without hesitation, he used his lightning cloak skill, electrocuting them instantly. The electrical charge wasn't to be messed with either, as it easily scattered and connected to the nearest targets, leaving all of them charred. This delighted him, as he realized this skill was more versatile than he initially thought, proving effective at both close and medium range. And the monsters here seemed to specialize in inflicting status ailments, but they had picked the wrong opponent. Now they became food for him, turning into a meal akin to chicken tenders. Biting into them was just as delicious, with the poison frog meat melting in his mouth. The seasoning even reminded him of Morphus, making him crave a beer. In addition to the satisfying meal, he gained new skills such as venom, temperature variation, poison scale powder, paralysis scale powder, and aerial slash. These were excellent additions to his growing arsenal, but his attention was soon diverted by a crashing sound and human voices echoing through the cave. But this just excited him, as it was the first time he had noticed other adventurers making it this far in the Miasma Labyrinth. With this, he quickly tidied up his things and departed in the direction of the voices. He might have found people who shared his interest in this labyrinth, and if he was lucky, he might even be able to exchange valuable information with them. The possibility of finding like-minded individuals or gaining new insights into the labyrinth filled him with anticipation as he moved swiftly towards the source of the commotion.